and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
Good day, everybody. Excuse me. This is UCY.tv with the Solvinur Event. I'm your host, Walter Hendricks, coming to you from the Netherlands, where it's 4 p.m. It's 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The date is 13th of August, 2016. There. And we got that out of the way. Good morning, everybody. How are you all doing? I got my coffee ready here. So, yeah, we drink coffee at all times of the day. Dutch people do, anyway. And there's some people in the chat already. If you go to ucy.tv, you can find the chat link there. There's Cracker, Grump, Juana Taco, Jules is there, Otto van Bolswing, Surely You Just, and Vincent and 3 Anons. Welcome, everybody. You can call in 718-717-8296. 718-717-8296. And you're supposed to call in. That's, I think, good use of Jules's hospitality to let you people take the airways and let us know what you think. There's no commercials, so, I won't have to cut you off in the middle of a sentence and say, oh, we gotta go to a break, and, no such thing happening like that. So if you can find the donate button at the bottom of the page at ucy.tv and you are capable enough to spare a few bucks, send it over there. So I mentioned the telephone number. There's also Skype. If you can contact me at Skype, Solvinur, Solvinur, N from Neo. Then I can also drag you right into this live event. We're supposed to be reading Brave New World. This episode should be called Brave New World Part 9. And before that we read 1984, and I was listening to William Roberts, who you can still hear at ucy.tv. And he mentioned both of those books specifically. He said, we should pay attention to these books. And that was not the first time. This time he mentioned both of them. In an earlier episode, I heard him speak of Brave New World and Brave New World Revisited. I think Brave New World Revisited should be next on the list, but I don't want to turn this into a book reading show, which it has like become over the last, I don't know, 20 episodes or something, maybe more. Yeah. And it's okay if I think I can add something useful. Like I read a book called something about stars, sex, and symbols. I can't remember the guy's name anymore, but it was all about mythology and the symbols used and the different kind of cultures that were around. And so, when he explains certain tales, then I can relate that some of the times to the stories that I know from ancient India. And I can tell that story, and then you have like two stories that are actually much alike, coming from different sources. See, and there's many of those. The flood being the most well-known story of humankind. It's I listened to a guy called Randall Carlson, and in some of his videos he was on at Joe Rogan, he was on at Red Eyes, and he was also on at UCY.tv's program Grimerica. Check that out. They're relatively new to UCY.tv as far as I know. Grimerica, you can find them at UCY.tv's mouse over shows. Scroll to the G. There's lots of shows there. And he pointed out, as people that have listened to me should know, that the anatomically identical humans, that means in brain capacity as well, were around for about 200,000 years. The numbers that Randall uses were, I think, 190,000 years as a maximum. And he says that it's only that for the last 5,000 years about that they speak of history. And why is that? That's because history means when we started writing. It's from that point on. And so there's a whole lot of prehistory. There's, 185,000 years of prehistory, of which we know very little about. And, hold on guys. A bit of coffee. He pointed out that there are remnants of these ancient cultures, like the pyramids, the huge stone circles, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which is one of the biggest megalithic monuments out there. There's a whole lot of it is underground because it was intentionally covered with dirt, so to speak. They investigated this dirt and they concluded that it could not be sediment. The gradual appearing of layers. They concluded that this was all dumped into these structures, on top of these structures, and they're just revealing the smallest part of it now, and there's these T-shaped standing stones with animals depicted on them, like lizards and such. And so there's a lot of talk about like how did these people make these? Why did these people make these? Who were the people that made these? Because this is about 10 to 12,000 years ago. Forgive me if I don't give you the exact numbers. Randall Carlson will give you more information. Just type it into Google or your favorite search machine, click the video section and find a lot about him. He also does geometry and other things. He's a builder by profession. He's not afraid to come out for the fact that he is a Freemason. He talks about that as well. And he says also that all this talk about new Masons wanting to rule the world is in his eyes laughable. So there should be, I don't know, I haven't come across it yet, but he said that he would like to do a whole show on that. He's done shows on different topics. But this one on the prehistory of the history of mankind, so to speak, was interesting. He gave a reason for there not being a history. He says that we as a people have amnesia in the sense that we don't remember our history. There's like 180,000 years of history is lost. Right? The assumption is, and I heard Graham Hancock say that according to him, he agrees with the current view, the current quote-unquote scientific view, that humans, when compared 200,000 years ago at the max, 190,000 years ago, they had the same brain capacity as we do, right? But that it took another 150,000 years, or around that, for people to kind of start making use of that, because he says that before that time we were still using the same kind of tools, the same kind of stone tools as the people before did, right? The non-anatomically same as us now. So the people from 300,000 years ago were using a kind of flint and stone tools, and we didn't stop using them for 150,000 years with the brain capacity that we have now. Okay, I find that a little bit illogical. Right? I think that there have been many I can't even call them civilizations. I think there have been many forms in which people have manifested themselves in the history of mankind, and not necessarily only with stone tools, because these groups of people with stone tools could even have lived together with a highly civilized civilization, just as it is today. A highly civilized civilization, that's double, right? Highly civilized society, because that's the same we have today. There's still people living in the jungles that could consider to be living in the Stone Age. Alright, so and there's that's how I started this little bit of segment of talk. He said that there was a reason why we are amnesia. We have we have amnesia. It's because all of these quote unquote cultures, quote unquote societies, whatever they may have looked like, because we don't know, were subject to an extinction level event in the form of comets and meteors. And he gives good arguments for that. You know, just take one of the things I remember just off the top of my head is he said, take a look at the moon. He said it used to be, before we went to the moon, that people, the scientists thought that all of these craters in the moon were actually, not all of them, most of them, a lot of them, were actually volcanoes. And it's only after we landed on the moon, they said, it is said, that we found out that these are actually meteor impacts. Meteor? Yeah, not comets. Meteor impacts. Right, and there's huge ones. And lots of them. Right? And so if you then know that the Earth, as he called it, has a 81 times more chance to be hit because of its gravity than the moon, and also because of its size, the Earth is much more likely to get hit. And a lot of those hits will end up in oceans, so that you might not see the crater. Right? And a lot of them will also explode in the air, like we had in Russia in 2013. There's if you Google dashcam Russia meteor, dashcam Russia meteor, they have all these dash cams because of the insurance companies and fraud going on. That's why they have these dash cams. And you can see this meteor coming in. And Randall says that if this meteor had been a little more denser, or had come in not at such an angle, but at a more steeper angle, that it might have actually hit the ground. And then it might have caused death and destruction. And so it looks like catastrophes have visited the Earth much more frequently than is being accepted by modern scientists. And he explains that the reason why, right, Randall Carlson explains the reason why they will not accept this view of catastrophism is because science rose against religion. And the religious idea was there was this enormous flood, this catastrophe. And they didn't want anything to do with catastrophism because that would lead them back to religion. Huh? And this view took hold, if I remember correct, he mentioned around 1910, 1920, because before that time catastrophism was alive, that idea. But it became unacceptable at around that point, I think he said, around 1910. And it became known as, what did he say? Let me get a coffee drink here. Gradualism. He said that the science from that day was applying the thinking that what we see today, what we see in the present, can help us explain what we see in the past. And they thought that things were rather gradual. Things didn't change that much all of a sudden. And so when they were faced with archaeological digs and were found out that the huge elephants, what do you call them again? Guys, help me in the chat. Those huge elephants that died out after the last ice age. All of a sudden, poof, all of them are gone. And they want to blame that, they wanted to blame that on human predation. But that, he explains, is a very bad argument. And so those seem to be more like catastrophes that happened, that are the cause of these mass extinction events. I don't know if they are called mastiffs, Vince. Maybe if mammoths. Yes, those guys. Yes, mammoths. And other huge mammals also died out at the end of the last ice age. And there's still a debate going on as to what exactly happened in that period. It's the period of about 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. And the going, the standing, whatever, the accepted view by the scientists was that there is this, Otto says mastodons. Yeah, probably. I think. I don't know. That at that time there was this cold, this little ice age, and if they want to make a graph of the temperature, it's one curve. But Randall Carlson points out that it's probably not that. It's more like two of those, two spikes. And not a gradual curve, but more like two spikes, more like two events, two catastrophes happening. And what you see happening is that the sea levels were drastically lower. I think he's talking about 300 or 400 foot. So that if you look at Google Earth and you look at a little bit of distance, you see this lighter bluish plateau, so to speak, on the edge of most of the continents. You know, they would be dried. That would be dry land. And I think it was Graham Hancock that went and learned how to dive and made all these pictures of structures underwater. I posted one on Twitter a couple of days ago. It's a fracking pyramid underwater. And that water had to have been gone for people to be able to build that, right? And that water was gone at about 10 to 12,000 years ago. See? So there must have been some kind of people around that knew how to do that. And not only that, you know, it's... I'm just guessing here, right? Because I'm going to guess that this pyramid is exactly... has exactly the same proportions, and its place on Earth is probably of an exact same importance as many of the other ancient structures that have been left behind on Earth. Their place on Earth related to the Earth itself is important. A lot of times these structures are on a line between mounts of tops of mountains, for instance, and extreme points of land mass. So if, for instance, you take an extreme point of land mass and you find the highest point on that land mass and you draw a line, most likely you're going to find some ancient structure there on that line somewhere. And it's you can probably find it by using another line from one extreme of the land mass, using Google Earth, to maybe a second high point or another extreme. I don't know exactly how, but there's ways to find these points. You can also find these points just by knowing what their names are, right? So, for instance, there's a link between some structures in France. I think they are called Karnak, not to be confused with the Egyptian one. And these are a line of stones, 3 kilometers long, and they point directly to the top of Mount Everest. And so these ancient structures, they have some relation to Earth's geometry. Geometry means, geo means Earth, right? Blah, blah. Okay, let's see, I'm missing something. Yes, okay, hold on. Chup. Contacts. Oh, blah, blah. Let's see if I can find you. I can find you under the PQRSV. Blah. And then invite. There we go. Ringy dingy 1, ringy dingy 2. Okay, if you pick up. Oh, there you are. Hello, Vince.
Hey, Walter.
Oh, you're very low, buddy.
Let's see. I've got background noise. I'm moving around here. I was doing a search. Okay, let me see. Let me just hang this. How's that? Is that any better?
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to back up some gradualism and catastrophism.
Yeah.
That was, going back to Huxley's bulldog. What was his name? He's related, predecessor to the Brave New World Huxley, called Darwin's bulldog. I can't recall his name. Anyways,
I don't know.
We had gradualism was the kind of the main scientific topic at the time. Now that's really been disproven. If you look at layers, like here where I live at in Arkansas, it's Arkansas sandstone's real famous. So layer upon layer upon layer of these rocks, right? Flat rocks. With gradualism, you would have erosion in between layers. If it was millions of years or even thousands or whatever between these time periods of this being laid down. So if you look at catastrophism and a worldwide flood, which for me is quite obvious when you look at the geology around the world, the White Cliffs of Dover, they extend over into Texas, over in the Biloxi River or the one of those rivers. I'm sorry. I don't have the information. I'm just going
Doesn't matter.
Of remembering looking at all this. But anyways, these same strata extend around the world. without erosion in between these layers, you see that they had to have been laid down almost within a singular event. A worldwide flood is what makes really the most sense to me. We look at the Grand Canyon and all those layers in there. Again, no erosion between layers. All those were laid down. The world was, a lot of water on, and as, the landmass rise up, the oceans fall, the oceans become deeper, the landmass rise, mountains become higher, water runs off. A lot of water was trapped in a lot of places. You see, the Grand Canyon was probably formed within a matter of days or weeks.
That's what Graham also says. He says that if you get straight, cut-offs like that, it's not gradual. If you had a gradual thing, it would be more V-shaped like.
Yeah, there's a lot of science to that where the back channels come back off the canyons. They split back and they appear to go in the opposite direction. There's a lot of good science on this. So there's no delta at the end of the Colorado River. It dumps into the Gulf of California. Now you can see thousands upon thousands of feet of conglomerate rocks, aggregate. All this stuff had to have been tumbled in water, and a lot of water. So it looks to me like this flood. And I made a mistake earlier, or was it last night? Reno is actually farther west than San Diego. I said Las Vegas, but I was mistaken. But anyway, so the Colorado River appears to be flowing in the southern direction, but for most observation. But you can see the breach in this mountain range that was holding back all these waters, these Great Lakes, Hopi. There's some other names there. Like I said, I don't recall all the specifics. But when that breached, all that debris that was ripped out and torn out along the way with all this massive amounts of water flooded to the west. You see all these deposits, down to San Diego, into the Baja. And so once that buildup was so big, then the water then turned to the south and emptied into the opening there where the Gulf of California is, between Baja California and the mainland of Mexico. All this rock and conglomerate that, like I said, thousands of feet deep, it could only have come in a singular event. So we find a lot of that. Now, as the water was held locked up, not only in inward Great Lakes like that, but also the ice age that was current at that time as it began melting. If you look at the landscape of the West, you can just see how it was carved by massive amounts of flooding.
Hold on. Wait a minute. You say at the end of the ice age when the ice begins to melt, right?
Yeah.
That sounds like a gradual thing.
Well,
Randall Carlson says that there were actually 2 spikes.
Well, there may have been several occurrences.
And that's what causes these floods.
Well, there were probably, several, like, water was held by ice dams. Up in the Badlands, up in, Washington State, up there from Montana, over Coolidge Dam, I think it was, that they've got there, where they dammed up that little bit of a river. But all those Badlands, you can see these huge, huge rocks. Now, that was supposed to be gradualism over a long time, but then I think the consensus now is that it was a breach. It was an ice dam going on at the same time that the ice was retreating. Like I said, it probably happened in stages. Like here's some more, and what the western landscape of America is really carved out by catastrophe. And any observation from the air in an airplane, you can see it quite obviously. Some anomalies. But this goes back to our conversation a few weeks ago, and we kind of got off into, or I did, I guess, or you led me perhaps into more of ideology as opposed to sciences.
The gradualism is more of an ideology than a science.
Well, it's kind of outdated. Gradualism is.
Outdated. Okay.
Definitely.
Well, because
Yeah.
of the new evidence that has been out there for a while,
Well,
actually.
Science is like a religion, and these people cling on to their ideology as faithful as any religious sect.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got things moved around here. Let me move back over here to UCY in the chat. Evolution is, by the mere laws of science, is impossibility. So,
Sorry, what? Can you say that again? I missed it.
Evolution is an impossibility by the mere laws of science that are provable. You can have
Evolution is impossible.
absolutely impossible. Now we can talk the differences between micro and macro evolution. When you go to the Galapagos, these finches, they're all finches, right? You don't have a finch turn into an eagle. There's no relation. There's no relation of any what's the word I'm looking for? The species changing into another. There's no intermediate. There's claims of Archaeopteryx as an intermediate between bird and reptile or dinosaur. But
Yeah, but I think that if you look at the fact that we both have DNA, all of us have the same DNA, it's just coded differently. I think that that's much more important than this whole thinking about evolution. I think the key is in there.
how do you mean? Explain that a little
Well,
bit.
because you're talking about evolution of different species, right? But no matter what species you look at, they got DNA.
Well, that's just building blocks. You got
Yeah.
DNA below that. I mean, you've got
Well, it's not only just building blocks. It's encoded.
yeah, it's like the code book of life. I mean,
Yeah,
look how close they share, similarities between man and a jellyfish. We've got
they
the
are
same-
in DNA wise, they are enormously alike. If you would send an alien down here and he would compare only the biological things, he would say, well, these are all alike. I don't see the difference
right.
if you look at DNA alone. So I think that's where we need to be looking for an explanation of these all these different kinds of animals and birds and plants and everything.
Sure. Hey, Rox, welcome. Hey, did you get your dragon head I carved and sent you, and the flint from some ancients here in Arkansas? We're waiting for that to catch up.
Yeah.
That was a prize. I like to send out prizes to our listeners now and then, and I sent out a few folks of our dedicated listeners here.
Welcome, Jax. Dale has also joined. Grimner is also there. Hi, buddy.
Hey, Grimmer. Right
Good
on, buddy.
morning. If you want to call in, 718-717-8296.
It did arrive. Cool. Awesome.
So have you ever heard?
Anyways,
Sorry, what?
So anyways, I was saying, evolution is usually defended by mainstream science, which,
Yeah.
thank you, Jax, which is, I find kind of amusing in the sense that everything mainstream seems to be lies. It's given to us for control, just like religion and science as religion, humanism. For me, is what it says is man trying to exempt himself from any accountability. And back to, I think last week you were talking about situational ethics, or it might have been when you and I were having our last discussion.
Yeah.
And then a little earlier with Otto in our discussion of what is, I guess, or what is the I have such a hard time trying to express myself sometimes. Anyways, I was talking about love. God is love. Y'all hear this. But what is the opposite of love? A lot of people would say fear or hate, but and you might have the argument of you can have a love-hate relationship, but the opposite of love is nothing. So outside of what love is, which love would be all good and right, then, and here I am getting metaphysical, but without love, there's nothing. So in the end, this is my philosophy that in the end, without love, then you will not exist. But like I said, that's all metaphysics. But I'd like to stay more towards the science today versus what man presents as fact.
I think they can be combined. I think that there's a lot of information in ancient stories, specifically about the heavens and about proportions, right? I don't know, it's probably a coincidence. Shirley just also typed in the chat vibration and density and proportion.
Well,
and there's ideas expressed in ancient books that sometimes seem to mirror the subatomic research that's going on. And they talk about the same terms, basically.
And that's a lot of like what Jules was talking about, where man has this God complex and trying to recreate life with, recombination of DNA and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that we've gone totally mad, totally on the materialistic side of it. So, that's insane.
Well, we definitely see a lot of information that's no longer available to us. And one might look back at the library in Alexandria, and it was destroyed by fire. I think these same people that rule the world today, they're descendants of these same folks that have been using mankind for, as farm animals and to keep us stupid and to distract us. And Christianity, I'll pick on Christianity specifically. Mainstream Christianity teaches, that's all part of God's plan. There's nothing we can do. And that just leaves people feeling hopeless and just to sit there and say, well, let come what may. And we're victims. And instead of trying to make a right or a change of wrong or stand against the wrong, then we're lost. So religion is a tool used against us. And going back to a little earlier conversation here in chat at UCY, well, I've lost my place in my mind here, but
no problem, don't worry about it. We did discuss some things in the chat earlier, yeah.
So, anyways, I think real science is kind of lost, and it's used as a religion. And there's so much information that we're overloaded, and it's hard to work through so many things. And you almost have to take a stand on an ideology to be able to defend it. But for me, these last few years, I've come a long ways away from certain things that I held as a belief. And I just suppose them to be ideas and notions, and we have to allow people to have their own ideas and beliefs, and as long as those aren't coming against us or where they serve not for the common good or what's good for all, I mean, if they're used as a tool against us, then we need to oppose them. And if it's part of your religion, then you need to question your religion also, whether it be so-called church or state-sponsored. Of course, government being the most dangerous of the superstitions. Thank you, Larkin.
Yeah, Larkin Rose. Check it out. larkinrose.com.
So with waters being backed up, let's go back to that. Part of after the Ice Age, there would be more land masses off of down around Bermuda, down between there and Florida. There's
during the Ice Age, yeah, not after.
Well, during and after.
After it, the water was, back in the ocean, and the sea levels rose again.
Yeah. Rose up and covered up a lot of stuff. You're just talking about
that's why you find these underwater pyramids off the coast of Portugal in the Azore Islands.
There's lots of stuff underwater.
Japan too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Japan. I've seen that.
That's where what's his name? I don't remember his name now. I mentioned him just a while ago that he learned to dive underwater, and he was taking all of these pictures of these structures. One of them seemed more like a temple-like thing, where there's a plateau with steps in front of it. Very neatly shaped, and in no way made by nature, by water or sand or whatever. You can see that it's man-made, and it's underwater. And the only time that was not underwater, in other words, the only time when it was possible to build there, was during the Ice Age, not after. There is a group of people highly civilized during the Ice Age, about 11,000 years ago, about. So, before that, there also had to have been highly civilized people, because it doesn't spring out of nothing all of a sudden 11 or 12,000 years ago. There had to have been, people before that were highly advanced.
Well, one must question too these timelines that are given. If you're using dating methods, all of them are flawed. The so-called carbon dating method is supposed to be only good for a few tens of thousands of years, 10 or 20 perhaps. Now we see things like that would contradict this supposed timeline given by mainstream science. There's petroglyphs up in Dinosaur National Monument in Utah depicting dinosaurs. There's these stones down in Peru that have these dinosaurs on them, called dragons, of course, throughout most of history. Dinosaurs, where there's a great many accounts of man encountering dragons or dinosaurs, which causes a great question about a so-called separation of 65 million years, which is an arbitrary number to me. We have footprints of man and dinosaur, not only down in the Biloxi River in Texas, but I believe it was up in Montana. They were exposing hominid tracks that, as they peeled away the layers, it just shows that they weren't fake. We have the Smithsonian Institute that for a good 200 or 300 years at least have covered up, I don't know about 200 or 300 years, but anyways, those people involved in the same movement of suppressing history of these rather large peoples that occupied here in America and elsewhere, these what would be called giants. People would donate these bones that they found to the Smithsonian, and they made a massive dump into the ocean of all this stuff, just destroying evidence. That there's a narrative that wants to be portrayed for people to follow. How much of ancient books like the Bible have been suppressed, parts taken out, other parts added to, but there is a history there. We were talking some about dispensation earlier. That's debated among the apologetics in Christianity on either side. But anyways, we have so much information to go through for ourselves that sometimes it's pretty hard to make sense of it unless we're trying to use confirmation bias for our own beliefs. And for me, I've tried to step out of that, but I think it's impossible for anyone to be completely non-biased in anything. We certainly are biased, even in our studies.
Yeah. Yeah. Jax says, man walked with dragons. There's all sorts of dinosaurs in Mayans pottery, he says he thinks.
Yeah, pottery. Yeah, there is the Inca stones, South America, but I thought he was saying poetry, but it is pottery, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Otto says the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata. Although the Bhagavad Gita is part of the Mahabharata, say there was an ancient nuke war. I don't know about that. I've heard those claims before. If you hear the stories of Arjuna, for instance, going into the mountains to find his weapon, which he gets from Shiva, and these weapons are reported to be very, very powerful indeed. Yeah. The thing is that, however, if you want to, that's my problem with it, right? If you want to take that story as literal, then I think you're making a mistake. He's with his 4 brothers in exile. And he gets the news that his coming enemies, the brothers of the sons of Dhritarashtra. There's Dhritarashtra is a king. He had a son Duryodhana, and he had 100 brothers, and they were about to have a war with these brothers, these 100 brothers. And it came to these 5, I should say, brothers. One of them is Arjuna, that they were having this terrible weapon. And so Arjuna decided to go on a quest to the top of the mountain to find a weapon from Shiva. And at a certain point, he's up there and he's hungry and he shoots a boar, and with his bow and arrow, that's what he's famous for, his bow and arrow, which is very symbolic, by the way. And he walks up to the swine or boar or whatever it was, and he wants to pick it up, and all of a sudden he's stopped by this elderly looking man, and he says, "What are you doing?" And Arjuna says, "Well, I shot this boar and I'm going to eat it, And the older man says, no, you're not. That's my arrow. I shot this boar." And, Arjuna says, "No way, I know I shot this, and you just try and take it off me if you dare."
Now, Beth and Paul over at Real Liberty Media are having a pretty good conversation and talking about some of these depositions in floodwaters or
yeah, go ahead.
And so forth. What are these alluvial fans? I think is what I'm looking for. We find those some modern day examples, but very, very huge ones up there across the Great Plains and stuff. But even find them happen in modern times underwater from, say, an earthquake or something. But definitely great graveyards is what we find in fossils. We find extinction events throughout the timelines preserved in the fossil record, but other than the debate on I said its name earlier, the bird that they say was transitioned between dinosaur and bird. Anyways, but there's never any transitional fossils. Like I said, all extinction events and never any new life coming back. We find isolation of the gene pool where you can see where it's been purposely done with animal husbandry, with cattle and pigs and sheep and dogs and cats and so forth. Man, supposed races of man, it's mere isolation of gene pool. When you look at the migration of a family group, that those characteristics of that group would be preserved and passed on in the genetics. So, one race of man.
Uh-huh. Yeah, this just reminds me of what Randall Carlson said. He said that if you take a look at all of the species, 99.9% of them, vanished.
Yeah.
That we know. So, I don't know, I think it might be, if all of that vanished, that could be a problem if you want to explain evolution, I think, maybe. I don't know.
Yep.
I'm not an expert on evolution, but I don't pay much attention to it because I don't see a problem. This is the deeper point, as far as I'm concerned anyway, behind this evolution creation debate. Yeah, I don't see a problem with a designer, or some people call it creator, whatever. Problems with that term also, but anyway, creating a universe in which evolution takes place. I don't see the problem with that. In fact, it's even so that in the Vedas, in the old Indian scriptures, they talk about evolution. They talk about evolution in a different way, though. They say, to explain it in the Indian way, that a soul is the one that is evolving. The soul is the one that takes on the physical appearance of a microbe, then grows to a bacterium. Then in the next life he becomes a virus. No, not a virus, because a virus is not alive. But I don't know, something bigger, something more complex.
Well,
and then in the next life, this soul evolves into ever more complex and highly sophisticated forms of life.
Well, that can be easily debunked. Evolution cannot occur because in the manner. Let me specify between micro and macro evolution, because there's a great many different types of evolutionary thoughts from the cosmos and so forth, but all of them would require more information than what they start with, and without an outside source, then that's an impossibility. You can't progress. You can only digress. So
hold on a minute. Wait a minute, Vince. The prebiotic life, as I think it's called, is a strand of DNA. And at a certain point, that strand of DNA got a cell, turned out to have a protection around it, like a cell wall, and that became like the first real living thing. And in that DNA is everything, every knowledge that you need for creating all of these different kinds of animals that we see is there.
Where did it come from? You've got to have the input source.
It came from a supernova, in which were created all of the elements that we now know on the periodic table, which created new suns. From a supernova, you get new suns, you get new stars, and these new stars are accompanied by planets that are made of the elements that are created by a supernova. Okay, and all these elements together can form amino acids and other compounds that form this enormous miracle, I would call it, DNA.
Well, you still have to have a source for information. What that says is man evolved from a rock.
We are stardust. Yeah.
Yeah, rock, stardust, whatever. But
let's say, don't misunderstand me. I'm saying that the material elements that are needed to create bodies like we have today come from a supernova. I'm not saying that you, the living force, come from a supernova. All right?
Well, what I get out of this is in the beginning there was nothing, and nothing exploded and created everything.
Well, no. That's impossible.
Right.
You can't get something from nothing.
Prove my point.
I'm talking about from the point of a supernova.
Morning, Hans. Yeah, well, you still have to have an original source for input.
For the supernova, yeah, of course. I don't know where that comes from. I have no idea how. I'm not even sure if the universe was created or has always existed. I'm still, in my mind thinking about that.
A supernova is a pretty small event in the vastness of the universe.
It's the biggest event in the universe.
The Big Bang I think is what you're trying to say.
No. I'm not a proponent of the Big Bang. I don't subscribe to that theory. I think that's impossible. You can't get something from nothing.
That's right, and therefore evolution is impossible. Evolution is progression, right? By its definition. Besides the other little sub definitions of evolution, evolution of species, the micro, the macro, and so forth. There's a lot to it, but basically, like Dan B. Cooper's argument of needing to have studies to legalize cannabis is a fallacy in itself. It's a plant. It's self-evident that plant exists. Okay, so whatever compounds exist in that, if somebody wants to do a study and say, look, I found this right here, and I found that we can treat this with that, and so forth. Okay, so we can't run any red herrings across the trail here, right?
I'm sorry, I'm missing your point.
The point is, whether you call it Big Bang or a supernova, evolution would require that all these pieces and parts have some type of intelligence to pull them together to create life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm convinced of the fact that there is a plan behind what we are seeing around us. It's because of the link of geometry. It's because of the link of number, proportions, and how planets behave, how forms like a spiral in all of these shells are manifested. Things like that. There's too much geometric I would call it coincidence is the wrong word here, because I don't believe in coincidence anymore. When you see so many of these proportions returning again and again and again, like with the sun and the moon, right? The moon is always faced with the same side to Earth, right? That means that it's turning at every day it's turning 1/30th or something, right? So, or 28, I think it is 28 days, right? So that's why we see every time the same phase, because it's not only revolving around the Earth, but it's also turning itself exactly so that we see the same phase every day. No matter whether it's a quarter moon full or full moon or, it doesn't matter. We always see the same side of the moon. And also the fact that if we place, at this time in history anyway, the moon in front of the sun, it's exactly the same size. Yeah, that's because it's 400 times bigger, but because it's 400 times further away, the sun, they are completely covering, the moon is completely covering the sun disk. And there are more of these so-called coincidences in our solar system alone. For instance, the relationship between Mercury, the first satellite of the sun, its orbit and our orbit, and also which side of Mercury is facing the Earth as it goes around. I think it's in a 5-to-8 proportion. There are so many of these things in just the solar system alone that makes you think, well, this can't have happened randomly, right? It's impossible. There's too much geometry in there for it to be random. You see? It seems to abide by some kind of geometrical law or something.
Okay. Real quick, Dan B. Cooper, listen, you're supposing people are wanting to legalize marijuana. First of all, cannabis is the plant. And if you look at the word plant itself, what does a plant do? It manufactures. So then the source energy for this plant particularly is the sun, the energy. And so to make the argument that you need studies to legalize a plant that should not be legal or illegal, so that's the point there. Now back to geometry, I see that that's geometry, math is the fingerprint of God. It for me says creator.
Yeah.
And look at the moon. All you're just talking about how it all exists in our observation of today. It's working in perfect unison. But when you take some exponential measurements that within the past 100 years, now of course this might be debated on flux, but the magnetic frequency of the Earth, going back a mere 10,000 years, it would be so strong that it'd basically be a ball of fire here. Going back into these supposed times, right? The rotation of the Earth is slowing. If you by extrapolation went back some 10,000 years, it would be spinning so fast that it'd sling everything off.
That didn't happen. So I don't see where you get that idea from.
Tell me that again.
You said it would be spinning so fast that it would spin everything off, but obviously that didn't happen. So where do you get the idea that it was spinning so fast?
Because you measure the rotation of the Earth right now and the decline of that revolution, and then by extrapolation you can go back and say, okay, if it's slowing now, it was spinning faster before, so you go...
No, I don't think so. I think that as, for instance, the distance of the moon to Earth varies, it's not a perfect circle, as the distance from Earth to Sun varies, because we are also in an eclipse. Omloopbaan, how do you say that in English? It's an eclipse that you make around the sun. It's not perfect circle. So also the speed at which planets turn can vary. I mean, even planets among themselves can influence each other's spinning by the gravitational forces they exert on each other.
Back to Dan real quick. That is a good point. When it comes to the choice of accepting legalized so-called marijuana, where you don't have to worry as much about being killed or kidnapped or held for ransom for growing a plant. Yeah, I understand all that, Dan. There's validity in that, but it should never have been illegalized. You need to go back, first of all. If you're accepting legal weed, then you know that you still have to comply with all the rules and stuff. Now, onto the spinning of the planets. The moon's getting further away from the Earth as it loses the gravitational hold. It slips further away. So
Correct.
therefore, you have to suppose that it would have been closer at one point in time. Just
That's
like this,
that's the going idea. Yeah, that some huge Mars-sized object blasted into the Earth, its remnants creating the moon, and that it was very close orbit to the Earth at first, and that it started going further and further until the point that we see it now. That's the going theory, I would call it. I don't know if that's true. There are some couple of odd things that Randall Carlson pointed out about the moon. And one thing I would like to mention in particular, and this you can check for yourself. If a meteor hits the Earth or the moon, it creates a crater. And this crater usually has a ratio of how wide it is and how deep it is. And this ratio seems to be applicable to all the craters on the moon up to a depth of 30 miles. If you go beyond that, it doesn't seem to work anymore. There are craters on the moon that are so wide that their depths should have been miles and miles and miles deeper, but they are not. And so this looks like that the moon is very resistant at its outer shell, that there is something holding back these massive impacts of meteors, not creating such a deep impact as it does. Or possibly these impacts bounded back like a sponge or something. Right? I'm not quite sure about the density of the moon. You know, I don't know how dense it is.
No.
That's one odd thing, though.
It certainly appears the Earth exists in a protected zone of its own. And we got a really question. Go ahead.
Well, Randall says that it's actually not so protected at all. In fact, there's twice a year in June, July, and October, November, when Halloween is. We are going through what's called Leonid's stream, and this used to be a comet. Apparently, this is the going idea anyway. This comet broke up into huge pieces and is now forming a sort of stream of smaller objects going around the sun and crossing the orbits of Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Earth. And we go through this stream every June and July and October, begin November. And what happened in Russia, 2013, was also in July. And that was probably from this meteor stream that is crossing the paths of our planets. And there's more of those. Leonid's one, because it seems to come from the constellation Leo. It's not the only one. There's more of those. In fact, Earth is a fracking dangerous place. There's catastrophes happening over and over again. And that is why we don't have a history going back at least 180,000 years, because that's how long we've been walking around anatomically with brains and bodies as we do now.
I would disagree with those numbers immensely.
Why? What's the problem? Which number?
Well, the 180,000 years. There's just too much evidence that Earth could not have been here. For me, it appears to be a special event. Matter of fact, now I'm going into ideology again, but for me, even the universe, I think, was created in a special event. I think there's many universes, but like I said, metaphysics here.
But not so long ago.
Not so long ago. And I can say that with science, with all the anomalies that we find with laws of science and with measurements, math, again, the fingerprint of God, math, music, onto the quadrivium, from which I thank you immensely for having introduced me to the formality of the trivium.
Yeah.
I had been attempting, before I knew who you was I had been attempting to formulate my thoughts and communication in that type of manner without even knowing that it existed.
Basically, we've been talking about the quadrivium indeed. Number, which is math, number in space, which is geometry, number in time, which is music, which you just mentioned, and of course astronomy, which is number in time and space. That's the quadrivium. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. My formal education is the old 8th grade education.
I'm not that educated myself, but I think the point that we have to take away from this is that the ancients knew. They knew about this stuff. It's not for nothing that these four are in the quadrivium. Quadrivium, yeah.
Yes, I agree. Yeah,
who was it? Pythagoras that said number is everything, or something like that?
Yeah, and of course the Pythagorean theory, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And anybody that's worked in any type of construction will use that whether they know what it means or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's older than Pythagoras, by the way. But
yeah, I would say so. It's nothing new. We rediscover a lot of things, but
geometry is a priori. Is a video that I posted. It's not like we created it. We revealed it. We as in revelation, not in revealing. The cover was taken off, as in discover. Yeah? This and cover. Right? It was there even before creation. I think some philosopher said geometry was used as a tool for creation, is the claim.
I just can't help but repeat this post here from Dan B. Cooper. Okay, we need a time machine to go back to the Reefer Madness days and tell the body politic not to make the plant that influences Negroes to look white people in the eyes illegal. Come on. Really? Really, Dan? Really? Isolation of gene pools, the so-called black and white races, influenced by a type of evolution which is not a progression but a degression. There's less information available when you isolate a societal group, a peoples, and they reproduce. They lack that information that they would have carried going back in time. So original group of people separated, isolation of gene pool again. So you have specifics that would be called race in the language of today. But I just find that, I don't even know what you want to call it. Racist? No. More.
Oh, yeah, I think Darwinism can be tied to racism, sure. don't see any problem with that. What was the title of his book? The preservation of preferred races, right?
Yeah. And
if that's not racism, I don't know what is.
Yeah, in the 1800s, they went down to Australia and thought nothing of killing a man down there just so that they could bring his skull back to England for examination.
All right. 17:20. We missed the top of the hour. This is UCY.tv with Solvinur Event. I'm your host Walter. You can call in 718-717-8296. 718-717-8296. Also, you might have noticed there's no ads, no commercial whatsoever. So go to UCY.tv, scroll all the way to the bottom and see if you can donate something via that donate button there.
Well, Walter, let me jump out of here and give it back to you or somebody else that'd like to join in.
Sure.
Grammy's off and about today, and so I'm going to be jumping over with Flash for the Dork Table, and we're going to talk about cannabis. So I'm going to go gather a little information that I have there to add into that conversation there.
Very good.
Hey, I appreciate all you do, Walter, and our language is such, it really trips us up so many times. And a lot of times we may, yeah, I did, 420, brother, Graham, and I'm dry. But anyways, our language confounds us and confuses us, and that's the point we're doing here is having a discussion. You know, are not debating. I do not debate. I like to think that... I like
no. I like to think of it of exchanging ideas, sometimes sharpening your mind. You know, it's all okay. Right?
Right. Absolutely. And learning, I think we have an obligation not only to ourselves but to each other to take a look at our most sacred and profane ideas and bring them to question. And it's okay to say that, wow, I was wrong.
Sure, yeah. I think that's a step forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, brother. Hey, I appreciate you coming every week. I find that great value in your work here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, buddy.
All right. Talk to you guys later.
See you later. All right, that was Vince. You can check him out later at reallibertymedia.com when Solvinur Event is over with Flash at the Dork Table. So, yeah, I was talking about Randall Carlson. There's, let's see, anything else in my notes worth mentioning. There was some other researcher whose name I lost, I think. He was... He was the one that was tying the temples, the old temples, and the high points and extreme points of Earth, and tying them together, and also this Randall Carlson. I think it was him. I'm not sure. Could have been this other guy. I think it was the other guy, whose name I don't remember. He wrote Fingerprints of the Gods or something like that, and that was about 20 years ago. And I also think that because of the new information that is available about the position of these ancient temples and structures via Google Earth and things like Stellarium, where you can turn back time and look at the stars as they were tens of thousands of years ago. And in this book that he wrote 20 years ago, he's trying to describe the connection between the positions of these temples and the stars in the sky. And so I think that that's correct. I think that's a good assumption. Take a look at the 3 pyramids of Giza and the belt of Orion, for instance. The Sphinx itself, at about 11,000 years ago, around there, or add another full cycle of the big year of the sun, which is about 26,000 years, you would get to 37,000 years ago, which could be possible if you want to believe the ancient Egyptians themselves with their calendars, which go back for at least 30,000 years, which is not accepted by the mainstream Egyptologists. This Sphinx, which has the form of a lion, except for its head, which was later replaced, it seems, is looking at the constellation of Leo at the equinox. I think it was a spring equinox at sunrise or something like that. Some special event, some specific time. Thanks, Matty. Yeah, and I'm not going to be able to get rid of that accent. Yeah, that's unlikely. I tried to get rid of my... in Holland we all speak Dutch, obviously, but the differences between the accents are enormous. They are so big that if I go to the most southern tip of Holland, in Limburg, I don't understand those people. Not one word. I mean, seriously, I can't understand these people. If I go all the way north to Friesland, no word. I mean, seriously, I can't understand one bit of it. And so it was the same here in Arnhem, where we have Arnhem accent. And it's not that bad. I mean, it's not that bad in the sense that it's so different from normal Dutch that you wouldn't be able to understand it if you speak normal Dutch. So it's okay, you can understand it, but it's an accent. And I tried to get rid of that as best as I could. Yeah. I don't think that's I don't think that's nice. It's disturbing. I can't communicate with my own people, with my own Dutch citizens, whatever you want to call it. That leads to communication breakdown. You can't even talk to people in Limburg or in Friesland. Maybe some other places where I haven't been. I don't think that's wise to create these communication walls. Yeah, so where was I? These ancient structures, right? this Leo that was looking at his own constellation in the sky. Yeah? As above, so below. That idea also comes back if you want to compare the positions of the stars with structures on the Earth. And this other guy which I can't remember, that I told you, his name I can't remember, that I told you about, that is doing his research in Google Earth, using Google Earth and establishing measures in sea miles. And these measures in sea miles are important because, and this also ties back to the very, very ancient knowledge. By the way, it's really stunning. It's the 360-degree circle that we use, which is divided up into 60 minutes per degree and 60 arc seconds per minute. Right? It's like our clock that we use to tell the time of the day. That whole system of 360 degrees is based on the Earth. And the sea mile, therefore, is, I don't know exactly where they got their distance from. I still need to check that. But it's somehow tied to this 360 degrees division that we use in a circle. I have to light my cigarette there. And so he's using sea miles to find the numbers that are associated with the distances between the two highest points on a landmass, the distances between the extreme edges of a landmass, like east, west, north, and south, the distances between high points and extreme landmass points, the distances between temples and structures like Stonehenge and Avebury and Walbergsea Hill and Berkshire and Ben Ever and all of these. He went all over these, and the thing is that he keeps finding these same numbers a lot of the times. And the numbers are 1618 and 3.14, sometimes 3.142. So 1.618 and 0.618 or 0.618 are, that's the phi ratio. And the pi, 3.14, or sometimes even in his measurements 3.142, which is a good is a nice approximation, considering it's 3.1415926. So these numbers keep coming back, and these numbers can also be tied to the relationship between the diameter of the sun and the diameter of the moon. The number 108 comes back there. Remember? I told you about the number 108. And 432, which is 4 times 108, that number also keeps coming back. So that's... I don't know even how to word that thing. You know, there's nothing in our language which could express what this implies. Not one word, anyway. Yeah, people might say, "Oh, God," you know. So that's all very interesting research, and it can only be done since Google Earth came on online, so to speak. Now you can use a simple tool on Google Earth. It's called linear. In Dutch, it's lineaal. I think it's called linear or something like that. Let me see if I can start it up and tell you what exactly it is. Start it up. Because I checked some of his claims, and they are correct. What he said on these few shows that I heard him on, I downloaded Google Earth and started checking his claims, and they seem to be pretty correct. Let's see, what is it called? Lineaal. Yeah, that's in Dutch. I need it in English. Let's see if I can change that fast to English. Yes, I can. Let's see, English, US. Dit wordt pas van kracht. Ach, I have to restart my computer for it to change to English. So no, that's not gonna happen. Okay, I don't know what it is. It's the one to the left of the email envelope. It's a little tool, you click on that, you point it to where you want to begin, you click once, and then you scroll out to where you want to go, and you see this line appearing, and then you scroll into where you want to take the exact measurement. You click again, you set this thing to C miles, right? Not centimeter, meter, kilometer, whatever you got there. C miles. And then you get these numbers that keep reoccurring. 3.14, 3.142, and variations of 1.618 and 618, like 6,180 sea miles, for instance. Those numbers keep coming back. Yeah. Geometry. Geo means Earth. And it's obvious, according to, I think I'm not misunderstanding Randall Carlson here, that it seems to be obvious that the people that built these ancient structures had a knowledge of not only the measurements of the Earth and that it was round, but also the great year, the 25,920 year cycle that is added. There's years of Earth. There are sun cycles, let's put it that way, not years of Earth, not years of Earth. Sun cycles, one should say. It's one per day, right? It seems to move from one point of the horizon to another. Yeah, that's one. And then there's the one where it moves around the sun in 365 days. That's the second one. And the third one is where the Earth, it kind of wobbles. And that wobble is going in a circle. And that circle takes 25,920 years. I think that's correct. Let me grab the calculator. 25,920. That's the number. If you want, this is the number that we're going to use if you want to investigate this whole number thing, right? This is an approximation, of course. This 25,920. The usual number that is used is 26,000 years for one great year of the sun, as it is called. So how do we get this number 25,920? It's when we start dividing it let's say by 108, I don't know. Let's see, back. 25,920 divided by 108 equals 240. We should be probably using another number. 72. 25,920 divided by 72, which is a fraction of 108, by the way. That's where you get 360, see? So every degree in this circle of 360 degrees is 72 years, which is about, as Randall says, a lifetime, a human lifetime. Right? So 1 degree on this great year is 1 human lifetime. If you multiply that by 360 for a full circle, you get 25,920, right? Which is the 26,000 year cycle. And so you can play with these numbers in different ways and get results that you're thinking, wow. Also a number that comes back a lot is 216. 216. This is of course a double 108. Remember the ancient Indian number 108? If you take a cube, you got 8 corners in there. Right? So grab your calculator. And this is also from Randall Carlson, by the way. I really suggest people check him out. If you take a cube, and which is one of the 5 Platonic solids, by the way, you check the corners and you got 8. All right, so you got 8. Type in 8. You multiply that by the degrees in the corner. Now we all know the degrees in the corner of a cube are 90. Alright? So you do 8 times 90. However, you can approach this corner from 3 sides. Right? If you give them all a letter, all of these points on the cube, you give them a letter. Right? And the top, for instance, A, B, C, D. And the bottom, D, E, F, G. Then you can have the corner C, you can approach that from B or from D or from, F or from below, right? So you need to then multiply it again by 3 because there's 3 ways to get there. So you get 8 times 90, which is 72 or 722, so you get that number 72 again. You multiply that by 3, you get 2,160. This is the number that's associated with the cube. And there are more of these numbers which all are proportional that relate to a Platonic solid. There was one other one you mentioned, I can't remember the name of it, some difficult name. Alright, so numbers. Yeah, it's unfortunate that I don't know somebody that I could invite as an expert on numbers on the show, because we actually should do that. You know, it's been a while since we've done the trivium. That should have sunken into your consciousnesses by now. And we should see what we can glance or grasp from the quadrivium, which starts with number. And so this is not a trivial thing. This whole study of number. It's... I think Randall even said that the Jew, the Hebrew language, and other languages beside the Hebrew were using a symbol string, a string of symbols, which were also numbers. Right? So every symbol from the Hebrew was also associated with a number. But that wasn't the only language. There was somewhere in that neighborhood where the language was used was another language which also used that. And he said, and I'm not quite sure if he had any further evidence for this, but he said that even the Sanskrit language also has this idea that symbols can be represented as numbers. Alright, so what's that? Is that playable on air, Shirley? Because I will play it on air if you want. Just let me know if it's too much only visual stuff, then people won't know from the radio, right? But if it's talk, then I can play it. Let me know if I can play it. Still got time for that. There's 15 minutes. It's about 9 minutes long. So let me know if I can play that. And I'll put it on the air. It's no problem. This is you guys' show, remember? And I didn't see anybody in the chat, saying, well, get on with Brave New World already. So, Hey, Joe. Welcome. What's up, buddy? Matty Clues. I saw you yesterday also at Media Monarchy. Check it out, guys. I think he's a nice guy, James Evan Palato, something like that. I'm probably butchering his last name. Media Monarchy, and check that out at Ixlimer. How do you pronounce that? Ixlimer. Let me see. I'll paste that in the chat. Especially for James. I'm gonna do this because I think he's a good guy and I think he's uplifting. We need this kind of stuff in underground media. It's I think it's 12 Eastern Standard. So right after my show ends, James Evan Palato, let me paste that into in the chat. James Evan Palato, Media Monarchy. He does a lot of stuff with music, but also he picks out the news for you. On different topics such as food and conspiracy and things like that. So check it out. Mixlr.com, mixlr.com/Media Monarchy. There you go, James. Maybe I caught some listener for you. He does nice music, and like I said, we need some light stuff now and then. You need to relax every now and then. Don't immerse yourself into darkness too long. It's not good for you. You need to take a break every now and then. Yeah, he's doing it for like 10 years already, Matty, isn't he? And Matty also says, how you living today? Oh man, it's It's not funny. These the controls by government are so tight that you can't move your ass. It's ridiculous. Holland is a land of rules. Let's see. Yeah, this is maybe next week then, because I'd have to check it first before I can decide if I can play this on air or not, even if it's 8 minutes. And I don't care that it's about the Book of Enoch, you know, everything should be looked at, especially if it's, you know, that old. Is this Book of Enoch, is that in the Apocrypha, I think it's called, Apocrypha, something like that? These parts of the Bible that have been removed, I think it was by the Council of Nice, or Nicaea, I don't know, in 300. So, it seems to have been a time, I think I got this from Leonard Peikoff, that seems to have been a time when revelations were over. It was a time when people were writing down stuff that was revealed to them in some kind of manner. I don't know if that was with or without drugs of some kind, hallucinogenics or whatever. And the stories became so much and so many that they decided to bind them all together and say, this is it, you know, no more revelations, this is the story that we're going to stick to. Yeah, Otto types it out for me. Maybe I can pronounce it now. Apocrypha. Yeah, Apocrypha. That's apocryphal writings. They seem to have been taken out of the Bible. You know, of course, that's a bad idea. The more information we can glance from ancient scriptures, the better we can understand what they were talking about or what they were trying to get across. And I have to agree with Randall Carlson again that he claims that these structures that were built, the temples and the pyramids and the stone circles, the megalithic structures like in Karnak, not Egypt, but France, spelled with a C, that they have a story to tell, that they are there to further the knowledge, right? Because if it is so that we are only now finding out that catastrophes have hit the earth over and over and over again, that it might be so that in the previous years, pre-flood years, people knew that too, and that they started organizing to make sure that the knowledge that they gained as a people was passed on to whoever survived the next extinction level event, which is inevitable, it seems. He also did some investigation into these catastrophic events going back more than one full sun year. One full cycle of sun year in the sense of the third year, the third cycle, the 25,920 year cycle. He went beyond that. I think he went as far back as, let's see, divided by 30, I think like 12 cycles, so like 500,000 years, and tried to find evidence for catastrophic events, and that they seem to be aligned on a celestial cross, which uses this 25,920 year cycle, and that these extinction level events seem to be happening on like spokes of this. You can see this cycle as a wheel, and then there are spokes on there that form like a cross, and the periods where Earth is crossing those cycles, those lines, those crosshairs, so to speak, those lines that form the crosshairs, those are the times in which the Earth gets hit a lot by meteors, by comets even, or fragments of comets. Right? So not only, I think it's stunning that these people knew about this 25,920 year cycle. You know, how did they know that? That's stunning. Wow. The only thing I can come up with is that this information must have been passed on. And this constantly happening of extinction level events can also explain the reason why people in the past seem to be so obsessed with the heavens. And the dark star, for instance, Sirius. There is enormous amount of attention for that. That may be due to some other story which has to do with the following idea, which is that the Earth is spinning around the Sun. The Sun itself is also spinning around the galaxy. The Moon, I should have started with the Moon. The Moon is spinning around the Earth. The Earth is spinning around the Sun. The Sun is spinning around the galaxy. If you take a look at those steps, there seems to be a kind of gap between the Sun circling. There seems to be a gap between the Earth circling the Sun and the Sun circling the galaxy. That's quite a big step. And there is this idea that the Sun is involved in another cycle. So there's more. Let's just say more. Which has to do with a double star. So that it's in another kind of circle, going in circles around the galaxy, right? People in the chat: Captain Gringo, Dale, Dan, Joe, Matty, Otto, Road Dog, Shirley, Vincent, and 3 Anons. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody. I'll be back next week. Check it out, guys. Bye-bye.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of scientific.
My name is S.M. Gibson, and I am the host of Anti-Media Radio on UCY